Good afternoon. Joining us on the line now is Lizzie Waterworth, who had her first break into animation voiceovers aged 22 and has been voicing award-winning cartoons and video games ever since, including the lead role in Horrid Henry and characters in numerous kids shows like Bob the Builder. Her new book, How to Talk So People Will Listen and Sound Confident Even When You're Not, helps you to find your voice and own the room, even when your legs are shaking. Welcome to the show, Lizzie.
Hi, Hannah. Nice to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. Thanks so much for joining us. So tell us about your big break when you were 22. What happened?
Oh, well, so my first foray into voice acting, I grew up really enjoying doing accents and silly voices and, that kind of thing. But I didn't actually think I'd end up doing it as a job. And then I was at a barbecue and I met the voice of Thomas the Tank Engine. And he heard me messing around doing my voices and said, I think you've got it. I think you can do this. And I was like, what? and then he organised for me to go to an audition. But I think it was originally the Disney Channel for a new show they were doing. And so I trundled into the studio. Didn't have a clue what I was doing. Didn't even know how to stand in the studio or anything. And it felt really natural. And I did the boy's voice, a low American kid. And it really had me. And I got the job and it went from there. So it's one of those very strange but amazing stories that has led me into the whole world of cartoons. So very, very, very thankful to Thomas.
Yeah. So do you remember kind of playing about with voices as a kid?
Yeah, always. I did. I mean, I sort of fell into it, but I always loved copying teachers and friends and impressions and accents. Particularly, I would just if I was going away on holiday, I'd come back speaking like, if I went to Ireland, I'd come back speaking Irish. It was a really weird thing. So I've always had it kind of there, but then it sort of exploded into animation, which was lovely.
That's fabulous. I mean, some people, obviously yourself being one of them, are really natural at doing accents and kind of just listen to someone speaking and start doing it. But others, actors, some actors really struggle with accents. And I mean, some actors can't do any other accent. It's a real, it is something you can learn, but it's amazing to have it naturally.
Yeah, it is funny. And some accents I find easier than others. And then other people find other accents harder. It's just, like you say, it's a kind of it's there in you, and you can practice these things, but it's much easier if you can find one that comes really naturally, and then you can just relax and into it, without having to think about each word. So
tell us how Horrid Henry came about. That must be fun.
Oh yeah, so I didn't know. I'd not heard of Horrid Henry because I didn't have kids. I wasn't really into cartoons. I was in my early 20s, and not that stops you from being into cartoons. But I hadn't heard of him. But I knew that as a new show was going to come out based on this best-selling book series by Francesca Simon. And so I bought a Horrid Henry book, and I started to realize this little character was, fun and energetic and naughty and all these cool things. But then I started piecing together what I thought he would sound like. So I gave him quite a rough voice. He couldn't be really posh because he's quite cheeky. And then, a bit of a rasp, bit of edge. A bit of a funny laugh, this little boy laugh, and then I went into the audition just kind of that it was in my head so clearly already that it was a really nice experience. They were like, yes, we think that sounds like Henry, and it just sort of fit together really well. So I was very clear with his voice from the outset, whereas some characters I have to really practice and find, but with Henry it came quite quickly.
How interesting. So how does the word has just disappeared from an audition. How does an audition work then when you're going for a voiceover part like this?
So normally you get sent what's called the character Bible. So they'll send you a script and some information with the character. So say it's a, glittery fairy or something. It'll give descriptive words. So she has a high voice. She's quite cute. She's disorganized. She's scatty. And then you start to create the voice, and then you just record a phone sample and then send it back to the people. And then if they like you, they'll call you in to do a live audition at the studio. And then hopefully if you get that, then you get the job. So it's a step-by-step process. For each show.
Yeah, interesting. And do you find it just as easy then doing the voice of a little boy as you would a little girl? Because obviously their voices haven't broken, so it's easy, I guess, to do.
Yeah, the boys just, for some reason, I can just talk like a boy. It's just a really strange thing. And once it's there, I can just do it all day long. So it's a really odd thing. But yes, and girls said glittery fairy, she's having really high, like really epic. Yeah. So once they're in my head, it takes a while for it to get it, cement it in my head. But once it's there, it doesn't go away, which is lovely. Although I have had the odd audition where I've forgotten what voice I did for the first round. And then I get in there and they say, do what you did in the test. And I think, oh no, I haven't got that recording anymore. So that can be the only challenge. But it's a lot of fun. I have lots of characters just sitting in my head all the time.
Yeah. And do you find it easy to switch off? So if you've been working during the day, doing lots of recording, doing a certain voice, and then you come home to your family, do you find it easy to kind of go back into your normal voice?
It's funny. Yeah, I do. And my voice gets a bit tired. But then when I walk in and I'll hear my kids watching a show that I'm in, and I'll hear like a no on the TV, and I'm just like, oh, turn it off, please turn me off. I can't hear myself anymore today. It's just too much, So that's quite funny when that happens. Yeah.
So how did this book come about? What were you trying to achieve with this? How to talk so people will listen?
So during COVID, I was doing quite a few workshops with younger children, talking really about voicing, animation, just trying to make them smile a bit because it was such a tricky time. So I was doing workshops with schools, various schools, just kind of half an hour with the voice of Horrid Henry. And the questions bit was so interesting. And these questions kept coming up saying, I haven't seen my friends for a really long time. I'm feeling really anxious about seeing them again. And, you talk for a living. How do you feel confident doing that? And then someone else would say, I'm only texting, I'm finding it really difficult to speak. And there was this theme of just people just seem to have lost some confidence. So I was looking for a book on this subject and I couldn't find one book on this subject for kids, which I just could not believe. So I thought, I'm going to write one. So I started writing a proposal. Well, I actually recorded an intro rather than writing it because that's how I think is, audio. And I wanted it to feel fun and I have characters even in the audio bit, like even in the introduction saying who I am. And then I rang a book agent. I wrote to a few book agents and didn't really hear. And, I'm told book agents are super busy. So I actually just rang one in the end and said, hi, my name's the voice of I've got this idea for a book. And immediately she said, oh, I love this. Yes, let's meet. And when we met, and within 2 hours, we had a whole little proposal idea ready and then sent it off to publishers. And then amazingly, Penguin DK really wanted to go with it. So it's been great. And they've been wonderful, really supportive. And we're just trying to get this book out to as many children as possible. So it's great.
That's wonderful. It happened like that. It was obviously meant to be.
Yeah, I know. Because I've heard stories about how difficult it is to, when you've got a set idea on a book and then you get it from that conception to out there. So I was very, very fortunate. Yeah.
Great. So you've got some big names involved as well. Some quotes and tips from people like Stephen Fry.
I know. Oh my goodness. I've just been so lucky. So I started off asking a few cartoon friends from various shows. So the Amazing World of Gumball and Thomas and Friends, because these are friends of mine who voice the characters. It's quite a small world in animation. So they were giving tips. And then I don't know Stephen Fry, but I literally bumped into him at a recording studio. And I said, oh, Stephen. And I went, Stephen. And he said, hello. I said, oh, my name is Lizzie Waterworth. I'm writing this book. And obviously you're such an eloquent speaker. How would you consider doing a little tip for it? And he said, yes. And so on the stairs on the studio, he recorded as a voice note on my phone, this beautiful, eloquent tip, and then gave permission for it to be used on the audiobook and the book, the actual book. So it was amazing. And so, people I think have just been really on board with it because I think generally we all recognize that there is a problem with communicating, a deep-seated problem. So the more we can help young people, the better, I think.
Yeah, because kids in school are taught how to read and write, which is obviously really important, but not so much public speaking and things. I mean, if they choose a bit later on in school, if they choose to go down the drama route, then obviously that comes into it a bit more. But just general day to day in school, that doesn't really happen, does it?
No, it amazes me. I've done so many school visits now, and what is interesting is I do go visit private schools and state schools, and I'm finding that the same questions come up, the same issues, the same. It doesn't seem to make a difference what school you go to or where. But public speaking is just not really properly taught, as a sort of, we must do this week, in the same way you definitely have a maths lesson or an English lesson. But speaking, it's just vital, isn't it? Because you can be the smartest person in the world, but if you can't communicate properly, it's kind of, game over as you get older. It's going to be really difficult to get that job you want, or to get that place in that school, or, when you have to go for those interviews and presentations.
Absolutely. I remember in school, when I was at school, that you had like a debate team, things like that. But again, that was choice. So the kids that were already confident speakers and enjoyed getting into a debate put themselves forward and loved it. But there were obviously loads of kids that had no interest or no confidence to do that, so didn't, and that doesn't really help, does it?
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, each school visit, what I try and do is I want them to come out just feeling a little bit braver about even just coming to the front, like, because you'll start off like a workshop and the children, some of the kids will say, well, I'm not going to the front. There's no way, to do their presentation. I give them like a little fun task of creating a cartoon character. And by the end of it, even if they just come to the front and don't say anything, that's such an achievement for them. And, it's really lovely seeing that happen. Because hopefully these tips, it's not just a growth mindset. These are actual things you can do in that moment. Like when your legs are shaking, what can you do? Anchor them, and you find you're speaking really fast because you're really, really nervous. What can you do? And then, just take a pause. Yeah, it's really sort of just trying to coach them through those simple things that they can do.
Yeah, and it helps giving kids confidence from a young age, because it can take them throughout their whole lives. There's lots of adults that aren't confident in speaking. Public speaking is one of the biggest fears that adults have, and to have confidence in life as an adult can help you in so many situations. Going for job interviews, as you mentioned, standing up, giving speeches at big events. It helps in business, but it also helps, I think, with friendships and relationships. One of the biggest attractive things in a new partner is someone having some confidence. It can help you in every way of life, I think.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yes. And interestingly, one of the things that comes up again and again, when I say to both adults and children, because I've done these workshops for adults as well, is what do you do when you walk into a party? How do you cope with that anxiety of talking to someone new or looking at them, or, there's a whole thing there. And children, obviously it's drop off with a present for 2 hours, off you go. But adults, walking into a bar, it's a different kind of party. But essentially it's the same anxious feeling that you can get. So what are some of the things you can do to feel and look a little bit more confident when you have to talk to that person for the first time in that environment? And so it's essentially the same content. I was really lucky. I got to speak to students at the University of Palermo a few weeks ago, and Palermo is amazing. Oh my goodness. And and they were really asking the similar questions that some of the kids do in the schools. It's the same, similar content really. So yeah, you're right. It affects all of us in different ways. This topic.
Yeah, and the different things that you can do whilst talking that can affect the way that you sound. Even obviously if you're looking at someone, then eye contact and smiling is great. But even if they can't see you, you can tell if someone's smiling. It makes a huge difference. I was talking to someone the other day, and we were listening to a particular podcast, and we were saying, the subject matter was interesting, but their voice was just really dull. You could just tell that they weren't smiling. They maybe were a bit nervous and kind of weren't confident and having a good time. And it made the podcast not great to listen to because of how they were delivering it.
Yeah. Yes, it's amazing, isn't it? They're the non-verbal things that come across. And also in like a Zoom call, because Zoom calls can be so awkward. And I wasn't even going to put anything about Zoom in the book until someone had said, you've got to cover Zoom. Zoom's a nightmare and it's all communication. And then I did some research and I was like, oh yes, this is a thing. So even, when you're on that Zoom call, just smiling can make such a difference when you've got that awkward bit where no one knows whether to speak or not. And, you're only seeing shoulders up. You can't see any of the body language. So it could be really, really tricky.
Well, I think it's a great subject and a great book. So thank you, Lizzie, very much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot, Hannah.
Oh, no worries. If listeners want to get a copy of the book, it's called How to Talk So People Will Listen and Sound Confident Even When You're Not. And it's available to buy on our website, tre.radio, by Lizzie Waterworth, who we've been chatting with. Lizzie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.